Hi guys, and welcome back to another Tech Minds video. Now this will be a multi-part series because, well, it's going to take some time and thinking to complete this project. So first up, what am I talking about? Well, quite some time ago now, I created a video on an excellent project called Langstone, which is essentially an application that runs on a Raspberry Pi, and it uses the official 7-inch Pi touchscreen. This application then becomes a simple VHF, UHF and microwave SDR transceiver operating on SSB, CW and FM. A Langstone version 3 specifically supports two SDRs, that's the HACKRF and the PlutoSDR. Now don't worry, it does also support Pluto Plus for those that are wondering. Langstone version 2 though appears to support the Lime SDR and the PlutoSDR, but for my project I'll be using Langstone version 3. Now the reason for this choice is that it's only a few months old and it now supports a Raspberry Pi 5, meaning we get the benefits of the Pi 5's performance. The reason for HACKRF and PlutoSDR support is that they cover an extensive frequency range and can transmit as well as receive. Now with just a few simple components you can build a fully working VHF to SHF SDR transceiver. However, the HACKRF and the PlutoSDR have extremely low power RF output, maybe 10 milliwatts if you're lucky, depending on bands, so an amplifier will be needed. You will also notice that the HACKRF has a single antenna connection for receive and transmit, whereas the PlutoSDR has dedicated receive and transmit ports. Now this means that we'll also have to think about how we will switch between our single antenna and these ports, but that's for another video. Now the components here are a 7-inch official Pi touchscreen, a Pi 5, the HACKRF or PlutoSDR, a USB sound fob which is used to get audio in and out of the Pi, and then we have a mouse. Now you can use this mouse like a regular mouse to control the Langstone application, but with some modifications and a couple of buttons and an encoder, you can repurpose this to be used as the front control panel. Now the Langstone wiki page shows some great information on how to do this, including some source code to use with a small Arduino. Now we'll cover this, but not in this part of this video series. A cheap microphone from Amazon I will also use for testing the audio. In the final design I plan to use a better microphone with more preamp and EQ controls to get it sounding really nice. Now you do not have to, but I would recommend installing a decent cooling system to the Pi. They're not very expensive and they actually sit quite nicely on the Pi themselves. Oh, and you will need a micro SD card that will be loaded with the software that's inserted into the Pi. So let's start building. So first I will attach the cooling fan to the Pi 5. Now it does come with these little thermal transfer pads. They're not sticky, they're slightly tacky at best. However, they do stay in place once the fan and heatsink have been attached. And once all the pads are in place, we can now fit the heatsink. Now these are held into place using spring-loaded push clips. Now there's two dedicated holes in the Pi 5 board which are designed for these clips. Now one last thing to do is connect the fan connector to the fan socket on the Pi 5 main board, and then just tuck the wire behind those USB sockets. And there you go, one cooling fan and heatsink is now applied, and it actually looks pretty cool. No pun intended there. Now before we attach the Pi 5 to the back of the screen, we do need to write the operating system to a micro SD card. Now it's way easier to put the SD card into the Pi now rather than when it's attached to the screen and the back case is on. So using the standard Raspberry Pi Imager software, which is a free download from the Raspberry Pi website, I'll go ahead and select the Pi 5. That's assuming that you're installing Langstone version 3. If you're using a Pi 4, then you'll need to look at the previous versions of Langstone. Now the operating system version that we'll need to install is found under Raspberry Pi OS Other, and then select Pi OS Lite 64-bit. Choose the storage and then click Next. Now you can edit some settings here before we write the OS to the SD card. I would recommend that you set a host name to something that you can remember and identify on the network. Provide a username and password, and if you're not going to connect the Pi to the internet via Ethernet cable, then configure the wireless information here so that the Pi will connect to your Wi-Fi router when it powers up. Now the application itself does not need the internet to run, but we do need the internet to install the software initially. So fill out all of those fields and click Save and then Next. Now the OS will now write to the SD card, and once finished, take the SD card out of your computer and then pop it into your Pi like this. Now make sure you get that SD card the correct way around. And I'd like to take a moment to thank jlcpcb for sponsoring this video. Now jlcpcb provide easy, affordable and reliable PCB and PCBA solutions, empowering electronic engineers to develop projects efficiently. Now jlcpcb website is extremely easy to use, and ordering PCBs from jlcpcb is effortless. Just simply upload your Gerber file to get an instant quote and place your order in minutes. It's as easy as shopping online. Now you can get 1 to 8 layer PCBs for just $2, and with efficient large-scale production, this reduces cost and brings you unbeatable prices. Quality and lead time is highly reliable, and all in-house production ensures quality stability, especially with their strict quality control in every process. You can have your PCBs produced in less than 24 hours if you need them in a rush. Easy to use, affordable to make, and reliable to trust. You can always count on jlcpcb. Now don't miss out jlcpcb's 6-layer PCB special. You can get $30 off with a coupon and enjoy top quality 6-layer PCBs for just $5. Thanks again to jlcpcb for sponsoring this video. Now on the back of the screen you'll notice 4 standoffs, and well, these are used to mount the Pi board to the back of the screen. Line it up and then screw in those 4 screws so that the Pi board sits nice and flush like this. Now you can see here the fan and the heatsink that we installed earlier. It has a nice flat profile, so it won't cause any issues with the back panel once it's put on. The screen should come with these 2 power wires. Red needs to be connected to a 5V GPIO pin on the Pi, and the black wire needs to be connected to a ground pin on that same GPIO header like this. Now lastly, we need to connect the screen ribbon cable to the Pi5. Now there is a difference between ribbon cables for the Pi4 and the Pi5, so make sure you have the correct ribbon cable. It also connects into a slightly different location on the Pi5 compared to the Pi4. Now at this point, with everything connected, I should be fitting this into a nice box that will house all of the other components, like filters and RF amplifiers. But I'm still pondering on which box or case to purchase. Now if you have any recommendations, then let me know down in the comments. But for now, I'll just attach the standard official Pi screen backplate, and just make sure not to pinch any of those power wires or that ribbon cable as you're attaching it to the back of the screen. Now before powering on, I can go ahead and plug all of the other items into the USB ports, like the mouse, USB sound card, and of course the SDR. Now for this first test, I will use the HACKRF. Now power on the Pi and then connect to it using an application called Putty. Of course, we could perform the next steps by plugging a keyboard into the Pi itself and using the touchscreen so you can see what you're doing. Now once you're connected, you will need to enter your username and password to get yourself logged in. The first command I'll run will be sudo space apt-get space update. Once that's complete, I'll then run sudo space apt-get space upgrade. Now once that's complete, reboot the Pi. Now if you head over to the Langstone V3 Github page and scroll down, you'll find the install scripts that need to be ran. However, you have to choose whether you are installing HACKRF or the PlutoSDR. Copy the 3 lines of code for the SDR that you're wanting to use, and then paste these into the terminal window, or Putty window in my case. Once you press enter, the installation script will do its thing. Now this could take some time, so sit back and chill, or go and make a cup of tea, or whatever you want to do. Now once the install script reaches the end, it will make the Pi5 automatically reboot. It is essential that you have your SDR already plugged in before this happens. Now once the Pi auto reboots, the Langstone application will load and attempt to connect to your SDR device. Now if you see an error on the screen, double check your SDR connection and then reboot. If the error still happens on boot, you can take a look in the log file, which will be shown on the screen. However, I did see an error and I just had to run the installation script again because it reported an error about GNU radio not being found. But on the second run, it worked and booted into the Langstone application like this. Now, if you're using a Pi5 with a version 1 official screen and the latest 64-bit light operating system, then there will be a good chance that your screen will be upside down. Now, if that is the case, then you'll find a new setting within Langstone application that will allow you to flip the screen so you can see it properly and the right way around. If you have an antenna connected to your SDR or receive port, if using the PlutoSDR, you should now be able to tune around.
G0IXK, I almost had GW0. G0IXK, over. G0IXK, M3DV. Tell me what's
the left and right mouse buttons will move the cursor under the frequency, and when scrolling the mouse wheel, the selected frequency digit will change. Now, the Langstone application has been designed to be super user-friendly without deep diving menus to change settings. The main set button in the middle will bring up some settings where you can use the next and previous on-screen buttons to cycle through the menu. You just then use the mouse wheel to change the value. Receive gain and transmit power levels are also found within this menu, along with any CTCSS tones that you want to enable or repeater offsets if you're going to be using FM. Changing mode of modulation or changing operating band is also performed using the touchscreen. The squelch and volume levels are selected by touch, and then the mouse wheel is used then to change the value. And before we test transmitting, there is something important that we need to discuss and take a look at. Now, the PlutoSDR's output, and most likely the HACKRF2, well, it's an unfiltered square wave, meaning this has a very high harmonic content at all of the odd harmonics. So external filtering is essential if you're going to be connecting this to an antenna, and more importantly, if you're going to connect this to an RF amplifier. The first part of this build series, I will be concentrating on VHF, i.e. the 2 meter band at around 145 MHz. So with the Pluto connected to my tiny SA Ultra with a 10 dB attenuator in line, this is what it looks like when transmitting an FM carrier at 145.5 MHz. Now, as you can see, we would not want to feed this into an amplifier. Now, while this is only milliwatts here, if this was going into an RF amplifier, not only would these harmonics be amplified, it would make the amplifier really inefficient because it's trying to amplify all those unwanted signals as well. So how do we fix this? Well, it's actually a lot simpler than you may think. We need to make a low-pass filter, and using this website, you can calculate the values of the components needed to build that filter. Now, this website also generates a circuit diagram, so you know where to connect each component. There are also other types of filters to choose from. In fact, for this transmitting filter, I'll be using a low pass with the cutoff frequency set to around 148 MHz. But when it comes to fine-tuning my receive path for VHF, I could make a bandpass filter, but more on that later in another video. Using the values listed here for the capacitors and the inductors, I set out to make my very own low-pass filter for the 2 meter handband. Now, this was made just using some scraps I had laying around in the shack and in my junk drawers. Now, I used some enamelled copper wire to form the inductors, which worked out to about 3 turns around a 5mm former, or a screwdriver head. The circuit, according to the website, requires 2 of these, so I made 2. I then found a small piece of copper-sided circuit board where I attached 2 SMA sockets like this. As I'd used enamelled copper wire for the coils, I needed to scrape off some of the ends so that I could solder them to the SMA connectors. Now, this was a little bit tedious, but it needed to be done. After soldering the coils into place, I then needed to solder on the capacitors. Now, I did not have the exact values as suggested by the website we just used, but I did have some 20 picofarad capacitors. So the 2 outer ones I used a single capacitor, and the middle section I used 2 in parallel. Now, would you believe it, this is the first time I've actually made a low-pass filter, and, well, I was quite excited to see if it works. Now, the way we can test these filters is by using a vector network analyzer, or VNA. We need to use the log mag reading and then set a frequency range. Now, I set it from 1 MHz to 500 MHz and then attach the filter between the 2 ports. And, well, this was the results. But you can see here from the first marker around 190 MHz, that's where it starts to drop off. Now I had calculated for it to cut off around 150 MHz, but I guess as the capacitor values were slightly different to what was suggested, that could play a part in the readings that I'm seeing. Also, I did not exactly measure the inductance of the coils, so again, that could have a factor. But remember, we're just testing right now. Now, as we head up in frequency towards the first harmonic at 290 MHz, we can definitely see that there is some attenuation. So let's hook this up between the PlutoSDR, which has a 10B attenuator inline, and my tiny S8 Ultra. Now, if you remember, this is what it looks like without the filter in line. And if we now put it in line, this is the result. Wow, it actually works. With this clean output, we should have no trouble feeding this into an RF amplifier. Now, I do have a VHF amplifier on order, but that will be for the next video on this series of building a VHF to SHF multi-mode transceiver. Now, before I end this part 1 of this series, let's take a listen to what the transmitted audio sounds like.
This is M0 DQW testing, M0 DQW testing, M0 DQW testing, transmitting with the Langstone V3 and using the Pluto Plus as the transmitter. This is M0 DQW testing, just testing with a cheap microphone. M0 DQW testing, over. This is M0 DQW testing, Mike 0 Delta Quebec Whiskey, testing USB upper sideband transmission from the Langstone V3 and using the Pluto Plus SDR as the transmitter. This is M0 DQW testing, over.
I hope you found this video interesting and maybe, just maybe, it's inspired you to give this a go yourself. Now, future videos will cover amplifiers, more filters, RF routing using relays, and building a front panel after butchering a mouse. Not a real mouse, because that would be quite cruel. Also, if you do have any suggestions for a case which the front panel can house a 7-inch touchscreen, then let us know down in the comments what you think I should use. Thanks again for everybody that watches, especially my patrons and YouTube members. Without you guys, none of this would really be possible. Until next video, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.